G'day, watch this.
CANdo, and I might invite the Professor to join me on this, has the solution. We propose a solution not only to fix these issues, which we've just identified, and there are a number of other issues which no doubt will present themselves. We need a long-term solution to ensure that this never happens again. And CANdo wishes to explore the tools which are present in some states in the US, in Canada, also in Switzerland, of direct democracy. And I'll pass over to the Professor, who will explain that in a little more detail.
We're arguing that representative democracy, as intended by the founders, has been compromised by the political parties and the factions. And we see this in a number of areas. We see this particularly, and the Labour Party is the very worst at this, in the caucus pledge. The caucus pledge, Edmund Burke said, you elect your representative for his opinion. You elect your representative for his opinion. Well, you don't elect your Labour representative for his or her opinion. You elect them under the caucus pledge for the opinion which the party tells them to hold. And this became worse under the Rudd government, when the powers of the caucus were effectively devolved to the kitchen cabinet. And it continued under Ms. Gillard, when she announced the details of the carbon dioxide tax to her own party. She'd given it in greater detail to the Greens. She announced the details of the carbon dioxide tax on the Sunday before the Monday, before they would be publicly available. She announced it by a telephone hookup with a caucus, which would hardly encourage any proper debate or consideration of this. And we see in a number of other areas the advantages that the political parties have taken. For example, in voting above the line in the Senate, where you need the wisdom of Job and all the abilities of a computer geek to try and find out where your preferences could possibly go. And we see that through the financing of elections by the major parties. We say that there is another model, and that is the model which prevails, for example, in Switzerland, in certain states of the United States, and in British Columbia. And this means, for example, in a situation as we found in 1975, as we find today, and as we found in New South Wales, there is a point at which, and it shouldn't be a low threshold, there's a point at which the people should be entitled, by petition, to call for a vote on whether there should be a recall. And there ought to be a provision whereby the people, if they find they were double-crossed over, for example, the introduction of a tax which in the election they were told would never be imposed by a government which I lead, if that tax were imposed, surely the people have the right to petition for a vote on whether that tax should proceed as a law. And whether, for example, there ought not to be some sort of provision whereby the people could petition that those who come to this country from a safe third country, coming to Australia, having landed in that third country with their passports, suddenly arrive in Australia without their passports and put up some story about the loss of those. Surely there should be an amendment to the Migration Act which should ensure that those people cannot apply for asylum. We're not saying this should be something the government should enact. We're saying that using the model that John Howard established as proposed by Alexander Downer in 1998, that is, an elected convention, based on the Corowa Convention, because the Corowa Plan in 1893 was the way in which we federated. Had that not been done, we would never have federated, because any proposal for federation would have gone back to each of the state parliaments and been torn apart in the state parliaments. The Corowa Plan was, once the convention reached a position, their proposal should go straight to the people. And what we're proposing is that there should be a convention to discuss whether, as we say, representative democracy has been compromised, whether there should be additional and carefully staged checks and balances which cater for the situation this country finds itself in. Because this government, as I said, is the most incompetent, the most wasteful and the most deceitful we have known. Every day that they stay in office, they do further damage to Australia. They achieved they achieved just a few days after the ABC Four Corners program, which showed shocking scenes of cruelty. But that didn't apply in all abattoirs. We knew there were other abattoirs which were under the control and influence of Australians. They achieved within a few days of that the closing down of the live cattle export industry. They've destroyed or seriously damaged that industry because the Indonesians have said, and understandably said, we can't trust you anymore. We're going to get our live cattle from other places. They've achieved, in just one announcement, the potential serious damage or even destruction of the Australian fishing industry. They've achieved that so that the Prime Minister could go to Rio and have a few moments where she boasted about what she was doing internationally in relation to the seas. And that has effectively, we understand from the fishing industry, destroyed or seriously damaged, or will destroy or seriously damage the industry. Every day this government stays in power, they do worse. And there is a point at which, if the Australian people make such a mistake again, and people do forget things. People forget. Young people will have forgotten what the Whitlam government was like. And the next generation will probably forget the Gillard and Rudd governments, and at some stage another equally bad government will be put in office. We say there ought to be a convention to ensure that this can never happen again.